Hi everyone. It's a nice quiet day here, and I was just looking through some new books that I think sound really good, so thought I'd make a video talking about them. And I know we discussed recently I'm judging the Costa Book Awards, and so I'm reading lots of submissions for that, but I'm hoping to squeeze in some time to read at least like one or two of these over the course of the month. So these are all books that publishers have kindly sent me, and they're all being published in the month of July. So yeah, they're brand spanking new, and a lot of them sound really good. So first off, there is The Group by Lara Feigel. This is a novel which takes its name from another famous novel, which is The Group by Mary McCarthy, which was published over 50 years ago. And I have this battered up old copy of it with the cover that's come off from it. And I read this novel quite a while ago and hugely enjoyed it. It's a really fascinating look at a group of women in their early 20s, and so it's to do with issues of friendship and their early professional lives and their struggles with relationship and sexuality and all these big questions. And so Lara Feigel takes all of these issues and brings them up to the present and looks at it through the point of view of a group of women, female friends, in their early 40s, and how things have changed or not since then. Obviously, lots of the politics are different, so she brings in issues to do with the Me Too movement and to do with that, but obviously from the perspective of women who are slightly older and how they're dealing with these things now. So yeah, I think that sounds really great. Another new novel along similar themes is To Dare by Jemma. This is about three different women from very different parts of society whose lives intersect over the course of the story in modern day London. And I'm curious to read more by this author because I read a previous novel of hers called After Before, which was longlisted for the Women's Prize a number of years ago. So yeah, I'm really keen to explore more of her fiction. Little Scratch by Rebecca Watson. This is obviously a proof copy, so this is what the finished copy looks like. And this is a debut novel which is written in a stream of consciousness style, following a young woman's life and experiences and thoughts, and it's written in this more experimental type style. You can see that the text is really broken up, and I know that it's not everyone's cup of tea to read novels like this, but I quite enjoy reading some experimental novels, or at least novels that do something different with the form of narrative and the style of telling a story. And this novel is also blurbed by Sophie McIntosh, a writer I really enjoy, who calls it wry, funny, and heartbreaking. Little Scratch beautifully captures the experience of trauma, but also the small, defiant, everyday happiness that pushes through and against it. The Araign Heron by Robbie Arnott. This is a writer that comes from and still lives in Tasmania, and the story is about an old woman who lives in a remote location and her encounter with a soldier who is in search of a mythic bird. And the writer describes how, as he was composing the novel, the wildfires were raging across Australia, and it really shaped how he wrote the novel, because it has a lot to do with environmental concerns and wildlife, which were things which were massively affected by the recent fires that spread across the country. So it'll be really interesting to see how he translates that into fiction. And I know this is a much acclaimed writer, that a lot of people loved his debut novel Flames. I mean, I've not read that yet, but yeah, this sounds really great. Another new novel from Down Under, which is a very different sort of book, is The Hunted by Gabriel Bergmoser. So this is about a man who owns and runs a service station on a very little used highway in the outback, and how his granddaughter comes to stay with him, and they encounter a couple other people as unimaginable terror visits all of them. And so this is sort of a thriller in a style which I don't usually read, but I'm sort of curious about. Like, I've watched some horror movies that are set on the outback, which is in the remote parts of it is sort of like the perfect setting for a kind of very tense, horrific story. So I'm sort of curious to just try it. Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. This is a novel about a woman who is a photographer that takes very explicit photos photos of average-looking men that she convinces to pose for her in the nude. And she gets an opportunity to have a fancy gallery opening and exhibit of her photos in London, and how this induces all this anxiety in her. So yeah, I think that sounds quite interesting, and I've heard really great things about this novel from friends of mine who've read it, so I'm quite keen. Rave by Rainald Goetz. This is a German author, and this novel follows the rave scene of the 90s and tries to capture that experience and the story of that through a few different characters' lives. And it's interesting because the rave scene has quite a bad reputation at the moment from recent news reports about different raves that happened in England, sort of illegal raves where it was a mass group of people that got together in very close quarters, so obviously not observing the social distancing rules. But yeah, it'll be interesting to look at this fictional representation of that big scene that happened in the 90s. Mostly Dead Things by Kristen Arnett. This is another novel I've heard really great things about from friends of mine. So it's about a woman whose family owns a taxidermy business, and she wakes up one morning to discover that her father has committed suicide, and how she takes over that business, and how she's had long-held passion for her brother's wife, and the complications of that. And so I think it's meant to be like quite comic as well as poignant. So yeah, quite curious about this as well. And then finally, I have August by Callan. This is a novel about a fairly average adolescent boy named August, who lives with his family in Michigan, but then his parents divorce and he moves to rural Montana. So it's his process of sort of adjusting to that new life and his coming of age experience. So those are all the books I have to talk about. I'm not sure which book. I think I might try reading Boy Parts first, because I'm quite keen on this, but I'm not really sure. I don't know. Let me know what you think about all these books and which you're most interested in reading in the comments below, and we can have a chat. But I hope you're reading good things, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye, everyone.